Maybe it's the last one. Maybe it's not. But let's do Cleveland Browns 2025 mock draft. Browns 3D starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR is brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, and all of us here at the OBR, we certainly appreciate all the support here over the last 4 months from the transition of what was a deplorable 3-14 2024 season into, of course, some coaching changes on the staff, certainly the beginning of the draft process, free agency, roster movement. And here we are, 7 days before the 2025 NFL draft. Again, we appreciate you all for supporting us, reading the written content every day. And of course, appreciate everybody coming out for the nightly streaming network here on the OBR, starting with Browns 3D. Today is Wednesday. You'll get Fred and Barry up after me starting at 7 o'clock. So make sure you stick around for that. Make sure, of course, you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube and, of course, to the OBR over on Twitch. Now, as we start this, I am going to preface this with I am not switching. Okay. I have been Abdul Carter since January. I will remain Abdul Carter until the pick is made. If it turns out it is not Abdul Carter, my team is to cover the Cleveland Browns. That's my gig here, right? And so we will cover who then becomes a Cleveland Brown. If it turns out that it's Travis Hunter, it's Travis Hunter. Even though I certainly would have went with Abdul Carter. But now for this purpose, certainly, um, I wouldn't say it's, if you want to say it's 50-50, I guess it's 50-50, right? It's either Carter or it's Hunter. I don't see the Browns trading out of the selection in any means whatsoever. But for the intents and the purposes, I definitely didn't want to do a mock. I wanted to draw up a mock here where it was done, certainly, with, looking at it from the possibility of drafting Travis Hunter at number 2. I've spoken to you guys at great length. Part of my concern is whether or not a wide receiver, just in general, warrants a selection of number 2 or this high. Me personally, for me, I always view a pick this high in the draft that it should be either A, a quarterback, or B, a dominant pass rusher. Don't have the quarterback to draft here. Maybe the Browns do pass on, the pass rusher. But you look at this team, and I've also brought up the fact that I'm not necessarily so sure about building things, back to front, because you're going to try to squeeze. You're going to try to find your quarterback here that just goes with everything with Jeudy in place in this scenario with Travis Hunter in place, and of course David Njoku. Hunter is special. I've been having a hard time trying to find just exactly what I thought the comp is for Travis Hunter. And I didn't hear it this entire draft process, and I've just actually kind of heard it the last couple of days. And I think I kind of like it. I think it kind of fits. But Ocho Cinco, Chad Johnson, that's the one that I've seen over the last couple of days where I actually said, you know what? Actually, that's what I can see. Chad Johnson was a ridiculous route runner. It was so good with his feet. He was running at the time, running routes untraditionally than others. I think you see a lot of that with Hunter. He's definitely got the special footwork. I think his certain mad, crazy long experience of playing both ways certainly aided him both ways. So taking Hunter at number 2 overall, pairing him with Jeudy, pairing him with Njoku, I don't know necessarily that there's a plan either way that, the Browns are hoping it's Joe Flacco who starts week 1 or it's, starting Kenny Pickett week 1. I think in a perfect scenario, the Cleveland Browns would like to be wowed all spring long and certainly all summer long and through the preseason by both Flacco and, of course, Kenny Pickett. And then just have it come down to a scenario where it's going to be one of those nights. You're going to draft a quarterback, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But, if you have a guy who has proven NFL experience, certainly Joe Flacco fits that bill and then some. Kenny Pickett fits it, not maybe as certainly as ideally as Joe Flacco and the length that Joe Flacco has played. But he's here and he'll be given possibly certainly an opportunity to, start for this team while this team starts the grooming process of the rookie that they draft. Now, and with a lot of people, there are a lot of people that think there's four quarterbacks that are going to go in round one. There's a lot of people that think three quarterbacks are going to go in round one. The people who think there's three quarterbacks who are going to go in round one, they kind of seem pretty much stout that if there was the one of the four who does not go in round one, it would be Jalen Milroe. Well, I think for the Cleveland Browns, that might be an absolutely dream scenario because I think Jalen Milroe is the one they want. I truly do. I've wavered back and forth on this. I think a lot of you look at some of these quarterbacks and try to say, what is, the fit for, the traditional Kevin Stefanski offense. And as much as I do agree with you, and I don't think, you're necessarily going down, in the incorrect road with that conversation. I do firmly believe, however, that most people don't want to talk about is that they were trying to change the aspect of the quarterback position within their system and trying to make it more athletic and give them yet another, you know, opportunity to develop the offense, bring different things in. And that was probably, started with Deshaun Watson. And of course, I've said this, it led to moves like Josh Dobbs. It led to the drafting of DTR, PJ Walker, Snoop Huntley, all of those moves. Of course, it didn't really work out. It backfired and they ended up playing quarterbacks that were basically essentially the polar opposite of the term athletic. We know Milroe has the history, certainly with current Browns offense coordinator Tommy Rees. 2023, Jalen had a really nice season, with Tommy Rees running the offense down in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, massive changes happened within the Alabama staff with Nick Saban, calling it a career and deciding to, take his axe to television. But you've seen, Jalen Milroe, the highs and the lows in his time at Alabama. Um, his running ability, his athletic ability is ridiculous. He's just got special talent with the ball in his hands, his running ability. He has breakaway speed. He has long speed. He's not a thin quarterback by any means whatsoever. He's about 230 pounds and he is jacked up, really physically put together for a quarterback. The arm strength, for me, and I don't think anybody really questions the overall arm strength of Jalen Milroe. Certainly his accuracy, certainly ball placement, things like that. Every now and then a hero ball that he never should have thrown. Those are also things that are on the negatives, certainly for Jalen Milroe. But as I've talked about during this process, when you're looking at a quarterback and you're looking at, what can truly be developed and what can't be developed with a quarterback, you can't take any other quarterback and increase the arm strength significantly. It's just not something that is realistic, obviously. You are not going to be able to take the quarterback and turn him into a supreme plus athlete with game breaking speed. That's just not things you can do. We have already seen Jalen Milroe from the Senior Bowl to the combine working on his feet, narrowing his gait with his feet, trying to do everything he can to increase accuracy. And you have seen it even a little bit more, a little bit from his pro day as well. Milroe knows he's a work in progress. And the thing I think that's really impressive when you have a kid who does need a little work like Jalen Milroe does the kid have the attitude? Does the kid have the work ethic? Does the kid have the want to be better to aspire to be great. And knowing that Jalen Milroe in his time at Alabama completed 2 degrees, knowing that Jalen Milroe was raised by, two military veterans, was in a household where, yes, sir, no, ma'am was the way it was supposed to be. If you have somebody you want to work with and you have somebody that you think needs a little work, I really think Jalen Milroe would be that guy. And if the Browns, and in this scenario, I get him at 33, there's a lot of people that believe Jalen Milroe will be available at 33. If that is the case, the Browns have to do it, and they just have to do it, right to kick off that Friday night, which would be just a great, great thing. If you get Hunter, maybe it's Carter at 2, you come back, you get Jalen Milroe at 33. And as I said the other day, in a draft where the Cleveland Browns hold the number 2 selection overall, if things are to go well with Jalen Milroe at 33, in a couple of years, people will be talking more about the selection the Browns made at 33 than possibly the Browns made at selection number 2 overall. That could be the impact if it works out. That's just the way the quarterback works in the NFL. We're going to continue here. Browns 3D on the OBR. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. We've had a really fun relationship this draft season, off season, with the great folks of State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights. If you are local to the Cleveland area, they are your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Look, you don't want to spend your Sundays, you cutting your grass, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Toro, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you're looking for new replacement, dependable time cutter zero turn, or you need genuine Toro replacement parts or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. They are veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders. They are lifetime Browns fans and proud supporters of all of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. Jeff Lloyd here from the OBR Browns 3D. On this episode, the continued support from all of you has been fantastic. Make sure you're reading the written content. Make sure you're coming out for the nightly streaming network. Follow the OBR on YouTube, and the same thing over on Twitch. And you'll get starting Browns 3D at 6 o'clock. 1, 2, 3 shows per night. You will have Fred and Barry afterwards. So make sure you stick around, certainly for the fellas. We are going through what could be my last Browns mock draft here of the draft season. And we've gone through picks 1 and we've gone through picks 2, the first pick for the Browns, and certainly pick number 2, 33 overall for the Browns, Jalen Milroe. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting, I think, because I think everybody thinks offensive tackle is a big need for this team, and I'm not going to lie, I do think it's a big need for this team. But when you're weighing the needs, right? You hope DeJuan Jones is going to be a starting left tackle. You certainly have Lucas, who was brought in as well, could start at the left tackle position. You still have Jack Conklin. My question is when we're ranking needs, if I'm drafting a left tackle at 67, is he starting from day one? He's probably not. But meanwhile, I have players on this board that I love in this position in skill rooms that are desperately screaming for a jump start. I think Mason Taylor might be the absolute best fit for the Browns as far as a tight end in this draft. I also think due to his athleticism, due to his age, he is probably somebody that's going to go before pick 67. I have stated numerous times I don't have an issue with a selection of Harold Fannin. Not necessarily the ideal tight end that I am looking for, but I've compared him often to Delaney Walker, and I think he could really be a nice addition. But one other tight end that I've truly been a fan of this entire process, and I really, really like this class. And, we understand the Browns won't have a shot at Tyler Ward. It won't have a shot at Colston Loveland. I get that. But this still is a chance for the Browns to get an impact player, and that is Elijah Arroyo. Slow start to his career at Miami. 6'5", 250, put it all together this final year in Coral Gables playing with Cam Ward. Showed out a little bit at the Senior Bowl. Wasn't able to do much at the combine, had a little bit of a knee bruise that his camp decided that maybe he was better off that he did not perform. Certainly was involved in the pro day for Miami. He's got a time speed of almost 22 miles an hour. I think he comes out similarly to when David Njoku came out of Miami, but of course we keep in mind David Njoku, as we all know, was just a pup at the time, all of 20 years old. Um, Elijah Arroyo was 22, so certainly a little bit of difference there. Jack Duffin will tell you that maybe he's not on the Browns' radar because he's 22 and change. He'll be 22 the entirety of his rookie year. So whether or not that takes him off, the board, I mean, this is based on moves the Browns have made in the past. I don't think it's going to take him off of their board. But it also means that if Elijah Arroyo was brought in at selection 67, he's going to be expected to be somewhat, of somebody who produces early in his career. And I think that's just fine with me. But I really, really like this tight end class. And I think 67 is going to be the sweet spot for Cleveland to address that tight end need. Because when you look at some of these boards, you look at some of these top 100s, you go through a mock draft simulator or two. By the time you get to 94, it seems like the tight end has pretty much run itself dry. So if it is tight end, and the Browns have been big loud about the fact that they're interested in this tight end class, they've had a million of them into the building in Berea. I believe pick 67 would certainly be the pick where you're going to get this done and bring in a tight end for this room, for this roster. Now, you get on further here, and then it takes you down certainly to pick 94. And I'm getting it one way or another. The Browns are drafting a pass rusher. You guys can tell me 5 million things. You can certainly talk about Isaiah McGuire. And it's funny that people have to tell me about Isaiah McGuire when, myself and a couple others here at the OBR have been the ones telling you about Isaiah McGuire and his progression, how technically sound he is in base defense, how well he performs in run defense. It's really been impressive to see the growth of McGuire. We can amp up these players however we choose for the Browns at the defensive end position. But the fact of the matter remains, of all the defensive ends on the Cleveland Browns roster currently, not named Myles Garrett, they combined for 11 sacks in the NFL in 2024. And after 2 years of Zadarius Smith, after 2 years of Jadeveon Clowney, there's not a way in the world I believe the Cleveland Browns are going to not find a way to seriously address the pass rusher position. Now, if I can't have Abdul Carter, and I'll tear out a little bit here now. If it doesn't go the way I would do it, or still the way I think it would go, Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. Now, I understand, you guys tried to tell me how Abdul Carter was undersized. That's a myth. Josiah Stewart at 6'1", 250 is a little bit undersized. But I will tell you this. You watch Josiah Stewart attack a pulling guard. You watch him play run defense. And then you factor in the fact, the pass rusher that he was his 2 years at Michigan after coming north from coastal Carolina. New York kid. Isaiah likely set the path of going from New York down to coastal Carolina. Josiah Stewart did some really nice things at coastal, and that is how Josiah Stewart ended up in Michigan. And if I can get him at 94, I'm all in. This is a really nice player. I'll get over eventually my heartache of Abdul Carter not being here, but Josiah Stewart certainly would be a welcomed addition. He'd kind of automatically come in and play that Agba Okoronkwo type of pass rush role that the Browns have had from Agba the last couple of seasons. Now, selection 104. So look, I've given, and this is the thing, like I see a lot of people talking about the Browns and drafting Travis Hunter. And it's okay, I get it. But then I see two maybe three selections away. The Browns are trying. You guys trying to put another wide receiver there. That I didn't get. Travis, I don't think you're drafting another wide receiver. First off, this wide receiver class is cheeks. Let's be honest. And if you're getting a Hunter, that gives you a Hunter, Tillman, Jeudy. What are we going to spend this other selection on a wide receiver for? That makes no sense. So, I mean, if it's Travis Hunter, that's fine, but there will be no other wide receiver selected by the Cleveland Browns. So now obviously it's certainly time to address the running back position. And it's really been a fun year as far as the running back class. I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. There's so many guys, so many names. You almost feel bad for the guys in this class because some guys are just going to go later than they should, just to the depth of the class. Dylan Sampson is one I certainly enjoyed his tape this year from Tennessee. He's not overly all big guy, but there's some good thickness to him. But one of the things I like is when somebody, and one of my favorite draft terms is when he can get skinny, and he's got to get through the dirt. He's got to get through the traffic. And Sampson is one of those guys. And one of the things that really impresses me is once Sampson sees daylight and he can just hit the afterburners, he's not a guy that's going to get caught from behind. The speed is legitimate. The vision is pretty solid. It's really hard, to find running backs in this class that you don't think can succeed. The question is whether or not the league is going to have the opening for them. Then the Browns had a huge 64 pick layoff. So if you're going to try to be, anything of a family man, a good husband on Saturday of day 3 of the draft, your window would be right after that pick of 104, and you could probably catch yourself minimum an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes, unless they trade up before the Browns are back in action. Why don't I just double dip right out the gate at the running back position? I don't think there should be a running back I've talked more of this draft cycle than LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse. All around back, can block, can run, 2,000-yard seasons, 60 receptions this past fall, played with an NFL quarterback who will be in the league in Kyle McCord this past fall, 20 touchdowns. Just a really, really nice all-around talent. Certainly a guy that could be a bigger role guy in the league, where he gets more touches. But I do think, even if Nick Chubb comes back, the Browns are truly going to go with what an analytic approach would be. And that approach certainly would be running back by committee. Now, I'm not going to ignore the offensive tackle position. If I can add one here with one of these 5 picks from 179 to 255, I will certainly do so. We did hear Carson Vincent. I have talked about him before, 6'7", 320, Alabama A&M, played a boatload of football over a career of over 50 games at Alabama A&M. Now, when you draft this year, look, guys, it's not necessarily a guy that's going to be a starter one night. And that's okay. And, I've told you a bunch about, how I think the, offensive line room is going to get turned upside down after the 2026 season. But if you say a guy like Carson Vincent could be your swing tackle or one of your 4 tackles, here in 2025, and then maybe vie for a little bit of a bigger piece of the playing time in 2026, that is not a terrible, terrible spot to be in. You're going to need a safety at some point. I like Craig Woodson out of Cal. He's not going to go much earlier because he is a little bit older. 5 interceptions over his last 3 seasons at Cal. Tested well athletically. It's not a huge, deep class at safety. And Woodson, this is where it's going to be interesting with Craig Woodson out of Cal. Again, he's going to be a guy that's going to be there pretty late on day 3 due to age. And, this could be a guy, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing for the Browns. Whether it was D'Anthony Bell, whether it was Rodney Hickman, both of those guys were undrafted, obviously. But both of those guys came in and, found a way, even though it wasn't the plan, were put in the opportunity to, go out and see if they could perform. And obviously both of those players did, so much so that D'Anthony Bell was able to sign a free agent contract to move on to the Seattle Seahawks. Again, I'm not assuming we're going to get any further information on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah between now, obviously, and the NFL draft. And, basically the news we got is there was no news. I don't think that's going to change here. So we're going to look at this obviously, and the Browns. It'll be a tell, in my opinion. If the Browns draft a linebacker, that's our tell that they think they don't know what they could truly expect. And okay, if that's the deal, and unfortunately it would suck, right? But if that's the case and he is just not part of this year, JOK, or it's going to be a slow start to his season. The Browns have been connected to Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State. The testing numbers were fantastic. The production at Oklahoma State was fantastic. He will probably go on day 3 because he's just not ideally sized. But this is a guy that can come in. He's got good speed. We know he can run around, can make plays. Certainly would start off on special teams. And, if there was a need or the opportunity for somebody to get some more playing time, then that is where, hopefully a guy like Nick Martin could find his opportunity here within the Cleveland Browns and their defense. Final pick, and George has just been pumping out players year after year after year. You know, big dude, 6'3" and change, 320 and change, Nazir Stackhouse. Browns ideally could use a nose. Jawan Briggs, certainly a valuable commodity in the little that he played last year. It certainly showed that there's the opportunity for a bigger role for Jawan Briggs. You certainly brought in, the veteran pass rusher. You're still going to have Shelby Harris. Michael Hall is going to be another one that we are going to, follow and monitor the rehab spot. But Stackhouse kind of brings you what you didn't have, and that nose guy, and certainly short yardage situations, goal line situations, just a little bit more beef. The Browns have made it a priority to try to get some athleticism in that room and guys that can contribute in both ways. That certainly would not be the case when you see Stackhouse. He's just a big old, put him in the middle, absorb blocking, just hold your line. So Nazir Stackhouse certainly would be an interesting opportunity, if the Browns choose to go that way as well. Again, in this scenario, and this is the cream puffs of it, and we've talked, it's the 5 picks in that top 104 for Cleveland. 2 overall, Travis Hunter, 33 overall, Jalen Milroe, 67, Elijah Arroyo, tight end of Miami, 94, Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, and 104, running back Dylan Sampson, the University of Texas. I might throw one more together. Certainly, one more mock draft before this is all said and done. We're going to try to get a couple of guests in here, just to close it out. Some from the OBR. Certainly want to get Pete here one more time before this thing all kicks off, next Thursday, 7 p.m. from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So really looking forward to it. Will the Browns make any other small minor moves between now and the draft? Nick Chubb, certainly a name to consider. Elijah Moore. All of a sudden it seems like Elijah Moore is on a big social media kick. It's been a very, very quiet free agent cycle for Elijah Moore. The Browns want to, just redo that for at least one more year. I think Elijah had a nice rapport with Joe Flacco. So maybe if the Browns weren't so high on Elijah Moore reunion, maybe Joe Flacco coming back, maybe reignites the flame, perhaps, into a relationship of bringing back Elijah Moore. Certainly something I would consider at this point. I think to this point, the Browns have shown us that they probably have the intention of using a lot of picks, of these 10, maybe even the possibility of making all 10 of these selections. I don't think they just brought in a lot here in this, off season as far as free agency moves and things of that nature. So it kind of tells me, by the lack of activity through free agency, and again, some of it was done with the design, not that they had to, but they chose to certainly bring down payroll a little bit, but the lack of guys that were brought in or re-signed explains to me and kind of screams to me that, they fully intend to, take 9 players, if not all 10 of the selections they possess in this draft. And maybe that's partly because they haven't been that draft involved in a long time. And, it's a chance to get the roster younger. It's certainly an opportunity to get the roster cheaper. And we've got a week plus more of covering all this and see just exactly how it does play out for your Cleveland Browns. Again, it's been a 4-month stretch now. We appreciate you all so much for the support here of the OBR, whether it is through reading the written content daily, whether it is through coming on out for the OBR streaming network every night, starting with Browns 3D at 6 o'clock. Again, you will have Barry McBride and Fred Greetham at 7 o'clock. Make sure you stick around for the guys. They're always fun together. This has been Browns 3D on the OBR, and it has been brought to you by State Sharpening, Mower, Sales, and Service. Stick around again for Fred and Barry. Stick around. Come back for the rest of the week. Come back for next week. Join us all weekend long for the draft, as we will be streaming the entirety of the 2025 NFL Draft here on the OBR streaming networks. This has been your daily delivery of all things dog pound. Browns 3D on the OBR. And we will talk to y'all tomorrow.